Chaos Gate Daemonhunters, it popped up on my Steam queue a little while ago and I completely ignored it. I think we've got to be honest that 40k, the Games Workshop license, is not a hallmark of quality when it comes to computer games. There are some fantastic ones like the Total War Warhammer game. Space Marine is a great third-person shooter. But there is a lot of dross. It seems like if you want to make a Warhammer game, whoever you are, you can. I mean, I probably could. I've never made a game. Games Workshop, can I have a go? Yeah, why not? So I completely ignored Chaos Gate. But then I saw a YouTuber I was following playing it, and they don't play games to review. They play games because they're good games. And so that made me take a second look, and I'm glad I did. It's actually really good. Once you get past the quality bar with GW games, then you've got to think about originality, and they're not hugely original. It's a little bit like the Star Wars games in the 90s in that the license went out to all kinds of companies, and you basically got a lot of clones of genres of games with mechanics that were basically the same with the Star Wars skin on top. And that is generally what's happening with Warhammer at the moment. However, Chaos Gate Daemonhunters is a great clone. It's a clone of the XCOM from Firaxis, the remake from 2012, I believe it was. Actually, playing Chaos Gate Daemonhunters made me think a lot about what makes Firaxis' XCOM good. It's so refined in terms of the gap between victory and defeat. It shares that difficulty, that sense of difficulty, but in different ways. So in XCOM, for instance, one of the key core mechanics is the idea of not getting swamped. You've got to learn how to manage the AI and manage the spawning of enemies. And Chaos Gate does that, but it has its own twist on it. So with Chaos Gate, you have to manage the warp surge that is going on all the time. And you can actually contribute to this with your own guys. So if you use too many of your powers, the warp surge goes up and there's a chance that reinforcements will arrive. Your Marines feel very powerful, as they should. They're Space Marines. But with the difficulty in mind of the encounters, you think, well, that's going to take away that sense of dread that you get in XCOM where you're struggling to survive. And it did a little bit at the start of Daemonhunters, but it didn't take very long for those 4 Space Marines that you got allowed to take from the start to start getting overwhelmed when the enemies got harder. It also answers a question for me. I've often thought how much of the difficulty of XCOM comes from the RNG, the random hits and misses that are always a factor. This game doesn't have them. It's more like Final Fantasy Tactics, some of those games that don't rely on RNG quite so much. So you're not scuppered by missing a hit as much as you are just tactically not moving your guys in the right way, because Chaos Gate doesn't have RNG. You're going to hit the enemy if you target them, but depending on where they are, the range has damage fall off. That's something to consider. So I was thinking, it'll be easier if you don't have the RNG. And actually, this game has made me think, no, it can still be as tough as XCOM, but not as frustrating. I kind of feel like when it comes to XCOM 3, after playing this game, guys, just get rid of the RNG. It's just going to be challenging anyway. I really like it. I feel like I'm enjoying it. And if anything, it adds to that sense of, I'm even more in control. If I screw up here, I can't blame the dice rolls because there aren't as many dice rolls. I'm sure there are a few, but nothing like XCOM. So it's an example of how a clone can do stuff better in some ways than the thing that it's aping so closely. It is. If you were being uncharitable, you would say it's XCOM with a 40k skin, but that doesn't really give the developers of this game the credit that they deserve in terms of evoking the 40k world. The sound design is very good. It has some janky bits, some weird sort of glitchy indie things. So certain sound effects, particular the chain gun of some of the enemies, the machine gun doesn't have a sound associated with it, or the sound doesn't fire sometimes when the enemy fires. There are some little glitches like that, but they're patching the game constantly. I think it's going to get better. I get the sense that, it was made with a lot of passion, but maybe the success that it's experiencing and the good reviews that it is getting will lead to a sequel, lead to them patching it and supporting the game more. I certainly hope so. It deserves it. Yeah, but they've evoked the 40k world. It's very deep in terms of what you can do, the strategy layer that you get with XCOM, where you even have in this game the same sort of, you have your research, you have your person who's in charge of building the base, which in this case is the Baleful Edict, one of those Citadel ships that is moving around a certain region of space trying to put down the antagonist, the Nurgle demon coming through the warp, and you have to try and stop this pestilence spreading. You have to report in to the Grandmaster of the Grey Knights. That's the chapter that you are playing in the game. And all of this stuff kind of builds on the lore of Warhammer. You're learning stuff about 40k all the time. The tech priest that is your equivalent of the engineer Shen in XCOM. You have an inquisitor who is researching and looking into old tomes and unlocking ancient tactics, strategies, and technology trees for you you have to requisition these things from the Grandmaster. He's not necessarily going to give them to you, and you have to prove that what you're doing in this region of space is worthwhile, and then he will allocate special weapons that you can unlock, more requisition for better space marines. It's they've somehow managed to take all those XCOM mechanics and give them a 40k spin, and the finesse with which they've done it and found comparatives in the 40k universe for all these things is really good, and it gives them an opportunity to create character, which I've never seen, like a tech priest, the Adeptus Mechanicus. They always seem just like fanatical half robotic things that are very two-dimensional. Well, there's one in this that is very intriguing, very interesting. She's obsessed with the ship itself, and the ship will prioritize the ship over everything else. She's snarky and going against the other characters. The Inquisitor character is frustrated that she's not getting the resources she needs to do the job she wants to do. You have this old Space Marine guy who has some kind of dark secret, some genetic malfunction or problem that won't allow him to be the one in charge. So you have to be the one in charge. You have to be the commander, and this guy's going to advise you. And then the relationships between those three characters for a game that is basically just tactics, turn-based tactics. They've put the world and the characters in there in a very satisfying way. Yeah, it draws you in, and the difficulty coupled with feeling like I like my Space Marines and I want to go into the next mission and get better at the game. That's the thing. I feel like I'm learning all the time. Bit of experience with XCOM, but you have to learn the unique mechanics of this game. So it's a surprising game. It really, it's surprising, but it's quality, absolute quality, graphically, in terms of presentation, but also the mechanics, which are intriguing, and some of those things that are even better that I wish for Axis would do themselves. There aren't many negatives that I can really point out. I suppose you could point out that it's not very original, but that's not really what I'm looking for when I see a 40k game. I just want it to be quality. I'm not looking for that IP to provide originality. I go to it for the depth of the world and the interesting characters and that feeling of the grimdark future. I don't necessarily want originality. There are some mechanics in the game that jump out as strange, but then XCOM has that as well. So, for instance, I was doing a mission where there were lots of enemies, and my mission objective was to kill a particular bloom sprout or bloom spawn, which is a big corrupted plant thing. And all the enemies were clustering around it, so I couldn't kill the enemies because the plant kept healing them. So basically destroyed the plant to stop them doing that, and then I'd won the mission. I didn't have to clean up all the other enemies that were a potential threat at that point. The mission just ended and I'd won. So once you know that, you can kind of exploit a little bit, and it's a mechanic that you would say, well, make the player clean up the enemies. But then you can, with your headcanon, you could say, well, we teleport out at that point. The Grey Knights can teleport around all over the place. We've completed our mission. We just left at that point. We didn't leave the Chaos Space Marines. We left them there. But it just doesn't seem quite right. I don't think the Grey Knights would do that, just like bug out. It's strange. So I think as you learn the mechanics, you probably can exploit, but all of these things are true of this type of game. When you know the spawning, you know the things that are going to contribute to getting swamped, you can start to find loopholes and things. I'm trying really hard to find negatives. I can't think of very many at this stage. I think it's a really solid game and well worth playing. If you're like me and you were looking at another 40k game, another flipping strategy thing that is half baked, and they've just got the license and they want to shove something out to get money from fans of 40k. This is not that. This is made with love and attention to detail and care. It's a challenging game, a fun game with the Space Marines unlocking different abilities and seeing how they synergize together. Really good, really good. So my review is get it. If you're into 40k, if you're into XCOM, two things I'm into, it's a must buy. That's my review of Chaos Gate Daemonhunters. Buy it.